Welcome to Test Those Breasts podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Vaughn. I'm a retired teacher of 20 years and a recent breast cancer survivor. My life has been pretty nutso for over a year, and many of you most likely know just how overwhelming this diagnosis is, and the more I can help empower women, the better. I launched my podcast on June 11, 2023, which was the 1-year anniversary of my diagnosis, as a healing mechanism, and have made it my mission to help shorten the learning curve for future diagnosed breast cancer patients and their caregivers. I want you to know that you are not alone. I was told from the very beginning that being diagnosed with breast cancer opens us up to the sisterhood of all sisterhoods, but some people need that extra help and encouragement and all of the confusing and many times downright scary information they are being flooded with. I've been interviewing many survivors, caregivers, oncologists, surgeons, nurses, therapists, advocates, and more in order to provide much needed holistic guidance for your journey. Breast cancer is such an epidemic, so the more empowered we are, the better. Now let's listen to this next episode of Test Those Breasts. Hello, friends. Welcome back to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I am your host, Jamie Vaughn. And today I'm so thrilled and happy and giddy and all of the things to have my guest, Amber Planeta, on my show. Amber was 36 years old when she was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. She completed 8 months of active cancer treatment, including chemo, surgery, radiation, and is currently on hormone therapy for 10 years. Amber and her husband chose to use cryotherapy and cold capping during her treatment, and she is here to share more about her experience. Amber is a mother of 2 daughters, ages 7 and 4, and enjoys spending time with her family, traveling, yoga, running, and cooking. Well, welcome, Amber. I am so thrilled that you're here. You are such a beautiful human being. And I just want to let my audience know that you and I just had this chance meeting last December of 2022 when I had gotten back from New Orleans getting my deep flap surgery on my breasts. I had a double mastectomy and deep flap reconstruction. And I was pretty excited, and I was in total recovery, and I was sitting in the infusion center getting my meds infused, and I was talking to a nurse, and you and another gal, another pink sister of ours, Jessica, and your husbands were sitting in that area, and they're like, "Hey, we want to hear more about this surgery that you had. We've heard of it. We just want to hear more. Can we sneak in that conversation?" And that's when I discovered that I could pull back the partition between where we were sitting and I could actually see you and your husband. And I noticed that your husband was like putting caps on you and doing all this stuff. And I'm like, "You're doing cold capping." So we just became immediate pink sisters, where we've been in touch ever since. And I'm so happy you're here. How are you?
Yes. Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be here, and hopefully I can provide some information that I did not have going into cold capping, and hopefully it will be helpful to some people who are interested in it. I will never forget sitting next to you, Jamie, at chemo, because that was my 5th infusion, but it was my first Taxol infusion. And that was so much longer than the Red Devil. And I remember I was icing my hands and my feet, and talking to you was such an incredible distraction because it was like torture sitting there freezing. And yeah, just hearing about your surgery, I'll never forget that. And yeah, it's funny how you do cross paths with people who I think are meant to be in your life. So I'm so happy that you met that day.
Me too. I remember when I was diagnosed, I was like everyone is usually just so devastated, and you're like, "Why me? What's going on?" It's like, well, why not me? Right. But seriously, It is the most lonely, scary road or thought process that we go through, and we think, "Oh my God, this is it. Holy cow." But you have a lot of people who tell you, "You know what, you're going to get through this. You're going to go through a journey of all journeys. It's the sisterhood of all sisterhoods." And they're right. Would I want to do this again? Heck no. But I will say that I have really met the most amazing people, such as you and our friend Jessica, and it has helped tremendously. And we finally all got together and got to have some coffee together and have a nice little chit chat, which we need to do again. So I just really, my heart is so full knowing that we are not alone, right? We are so not alone. And I heard about cold capping at the very beginning, and I just had such a short period of time that I ended up not doing it. So of course I lost all my hair, yada, yada. So I just want to bring you in and share with my audience a little more about your cancer journey, your treatments and your journey. And then we can kind of go in and help them understand what all goes into cold capping.
Yeah, sounds good. So I was diagnosed about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, which is crazy. And I think like many of us, I was completely devastated, overwhelmed. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought, or I considered myself to be a very healthy person. I had just run a half marathon. I had just done a full physical, blood work and all, everything came back fine. And so I was literally in shock at the diagnosis. And then another thing that I always want to share with people is it didn't manifest for me like I think it does for a lot of people. Cancer for me just looked like my right breast being larger and heavier. There was no lump. It was just heavier. And so when you Google that, you're like, well, Google tells you it's fine, and hormones and breastfeeding and all the things, right? So I ignored it for probably 6 or 7 months until finally it got to the point where all those cells that were making my breast heavier kind of joined together, massed together. And by the time I went in, it was an 8.7 centimeter tumor, and it was in my lymph nodes. So again, just shocked, stunned. And yeah, I'm sure as you remember, it's just a time of complete overwhelm. So when we were looking into cold capping, in some ways, I almost felt guilty, even considering my hair, in that moment when your life might be on the line in your mind. Just to think about my hair felt a little vain, I think, and I felt kind of weird and guilty about it. But at the same time, I did have already some women, some breast cancer survivors who were supporting me at that time. Thank God. Thank God for them. And one of them is a mentor to several cancer patients. And she told me specifically, she's like, Amber, you will not believe oftentimes people's biggest struggle with chemo is losing their hair. Mm-hmm. And I was like, gosh. And so I really started thinking about that. And I realized that for me, if I could keep any semblance of normalcy at all, it was worth it. And to be totally frank and honest, we had no idea what we were getting into with cold capping. It is a huge commitment and a lot of work. But I think I wanted to try to hold on to that normalcy. I also wanted my privacy, if that makes any sense. And so I did not want to go to the store and have it be apparent that I was going through cancer treatment. I wanted to be able to throw in a hat, go to the store and feel normal, even though I wasn't in that place, right? Without having it be so apparent, I guess. And I think it's such a personal decision. And I tell that to everybody. It's a personal decision. And I admire so much the women who do choose, like you, to lose their hair and just go through that, just embrace that experience head on. For me, I think the cold capping helped me feel normal during a time of my life that was completely turned upside down.
Yeah. Well, I want to kind of interject here a little bit and tell you straight up, I feel like maybe you might still feel a little guilty. And to be honest with you, I don't think you should feel guilty because you said it, everyone gets to choose how they go about this journey, and no one gets to tell you or make you feel any kind of guilt or anything. Had I had enough time to make that decision and buy the stuff, because it's pretty expensive too, right? A lot of work. I wouldn't. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know if my husband could have gone through and done all that stuff. Your husband is a saint.
He is a saint. It is an absolute saint. And we'll get into that. We'll get into all the details.
So I just want to say that it is really, really difficult at the prospect of losing your hair. And it's amazing what our culture has done to us, really, honestly, because I have a friend of mine who's going through breast cancer right now. And I check in with her periodically. She lives in Texas and she's a bit older than I am. And she was pretty horrified. And she said, I checked in with her yesterday and I said, hey, how are you doing? How's it going? And she sent me a picture of her and she has lost her hair. And I said, you're beautiful. And it's interesting because who knew that sometimes we could actually look good without hair? And even though I didn't believe it at first, because it's really weird. I tried to do stuff with my head and scarves before I lost my hair just to see what it would look like when I was wearing turbans and things like that. I tried to embrace that, but I said, you look beautiful. And she says, thank you, whatever, because she probably doesn't believe it. And I said, no, really, truly. I said, I know that feeling of going into losing your hair and not really believing that, because when we are made to lose our hair and our eyebrows and all this stuff, everything that we think makes us beautiful. And then to go into it and to come to the realization that really what it's doing is it's revealing the beauty underneath and just with the no hair, like the actual other part of the beauty. But I have come to realize that people make decisions based on what's going to be best for them. And you say you admire women who lose their hair. I admire women who take the step to do things to help them have some sort of normalcy. So thank you for being part of that crew that does that, because it's a big deal, honestly. And I know your hair right now, you have some extensions in your hair. And by the way, when I had long hair, I used to get extensions myself, and not professional extensions. I used to get the clip-ins and I used to and stuff like that. So I'm thinking to myself, whatever works, girl, you look freaking fabulous. And by the way, if you did go bald, your face, your head and your face, and everybody probably tells you this, you probably would have freaking rocked it. But what I like about culture right now is that a lot of people are coming out. If you go on Instagram, I'm sure you've seen it a million times. So many people are making it normal to either A, go flat and never get reconstruction on the breasts, or B, sometimes they'll grow their hair out to what mine looks like now and go, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to shave it off again. And they shave it off again, making it normal. So
I love that. I love that. And I think for me, when I was first diagnosed, there was just a lot of guilt for me in general, because I didn't understand why this happened to me.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I did something wrong. And so I think the cold capping and the hair kind of just played into that whole narrative for me. Sure. But to your point, you do overcome it. You get through it, just like we all do, just like our pink sisters tell us, right? There is a light at the end. And I'm glad I did it. I don't have any regrets.
We did too. I do want to also talk about, you mentioned just a little while ago when you first got diagnosed, I've always been a healthy person. I just ran a half marathon. That was totally me. I was healthy. I had just I gained weight during COVID and then I lost 33 pounds. I was in such wonderful shape. And I will tell you that I learned that, guess what?
Yep.
Healthy people can get cancer too.
Yes.
So you did nothing wrong. It's an epidemic. You are among the young ones that has gotten it. And more awareness needs to be brought about young women. I'm going on 56. You're 37 now, 36? Right?
37.
37.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, well, why don't you kind of share a little more about that cold capping and what goes into that?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I was just diagnosed and I had no idea cold capping was a thing. I had a friend whose mother had breast cancer who sent me the Penguin Cold Caps link. And initially when I pulled it up, I wasn't even sure it was legitimate. It kind of blew my mind that this was an option. But as I started doing more research, I found that actually there's a lot of cancer centers, I think especially in the UK, that offer it at their treatment centers. They have what's called like the Paxman. They use actual machines that circulate freezing water to keep your head cold. We don't have anything like that here in Reno. And so really Penguin was the only option that I found that could work, right? And so I called and talked to, and we only had, it was tight turnaround too for us. I had basically a week to try to figure it out. And so I remember I called and I talked to Teresa at Penguin Cold Caps, and she walked me through the benefits and the cost and the whole picture. And I told my husband, I'm like, gosh, I think I want to do this. I think I want to try. Are you willing to do this for me? Because it's going to be you, like it's going to be a lot of work for you. And what he told me is, I would love to do this for you. I want to be a part of chemo. I want to be in it with you. And this is a way for me to do that. It's a way for me to be there for you. And it brings tears to my eyes as I say that, because a lot of, and it's so hard to remember when you are just first diagnosed and you're processing all of it, people are looking for ways to show up for you. And so accept that gift. If you have somebody who's willing to do it for you, take it. And so we went ahead and we ordered the caps. And there are basically 3 of them that come in a box. And we found, I remember we got the shipment and we're like, oh my God, what do we do?
I'm crying. I'm sorry. I'm crying too, because you made me cry right there.
So we get this box of cold caps and I'm like, it comes with written instructions. I'm a visual learner and I'm like, I don't like, holy shit. Like, I don't know what. And so thank God again for all of the amazing people who share their journey and share their experience. But we found this incredible YouTube video that helped us so much. We watched it probably 8 times and I put it in the links if people want to watch it. But it was a man sharing how he helped his girlfriend cold cap. And he went through every single detail. And so we were at home and we practiced. We put the cap on while it was warm and kind of got a feel for it. It came with 3 caps that you layer in between dry ice. And so going into our first chemo day, the night before, Kenny, my husband, went and got 60 pounds of dry ice, which dry ice is not the cheapest thing either. Mm-hmm. And so we found later that there are cheaper places to get it here in Reno. The Crystal Ice Distributor down on 4th Street is half the price of anywhere else. So if you're going to do it here in Reno, get your dry ice there. It's the cheapest place. And so we layer the caps in between the dry ice. You put it on about an hour before chemo. So your head is already frozen by the time the chemo hits your system. You wear it all through treatment, and then you have to wear it 4 or 5 hours after treatment. So for us, we found somebody to watch our kids on our chemo days overnight, because we basically knew that, for 8 to 9 hours, we were going to be cold capping. So like I said, it is a commitment. We would find fun shows to watch, set a timer, switch it out every 20 minutes, just like clockwork over and over and over again. But again, looking back, was it grueling? Yes, it was. But I can sit here today and be glad we did it.
So in the end, approximately, because I know that even when you do cold capping, you still have some thinning and maybe some loss of hair. How much hair do you think you did lose?
So I probably lost half of my hair. And that's another thing to consider that I wasn't aware of. I did the adriamycin cytoxin, or also known as the Red Devil chemo. Mm-hmm. That is incredibly hard for hair loss. So a lot of people who do try to cold cap during that type of chemo aren't successful. I think because it's a really tough chemo for hair loss. During the Taxol, I quit losing my hair. But I lost, by the time I got through the Red Devil, I had already lost about 50% of my hair. So something to consider if you are going into chemo, if you're doing, and I know several people who did just do Taxol or 12 rounds of Taxol who were incredibly successful, lost maybe 10% of their hair,
So I probably could have been successful doing
You
it.
would have been, you would have been, I think, great. And actually, they tell you even your hair can start growing back during the Taxol treatment after the Red Devil. So, and I feel like mine did start.
And I feel like maybe that going through the Red Devil, God, I hate that name. But going through Red Devil and then losing more of your hair, that probably brought up a lot of emotions because it takes so much work. And then to have that hair loss, it probably, it was like over and over again, the loss of that and the disappointment.
Every shower was horrible because you go into it. So first of all, so you do the cold capping, but there's a whole side protocol that I wasn't aware of either. Basically, you don't want to wash your hair in warm water. So anytime you only want to wash your hair like once a week, and you only want to wash it in cold water, and you dilute your shampoo. And so you can't take a normal shower while you're cold capping because you do not want your head to be warm ever. And even that protocol stands probably 4 or 5 weeks after chemo until it's totally out of your system. And so I remember I hit a point where I told Kenny, I'm just not going to take a shower. I don't think I'm going to be able to keep my hair, or I showered, but I'm not going to wash my hair because every time I would wash it, I would just pull out handfuls. And I decided, I'm like, it's either I don't wash my hair for a month while I get through the Red Devil, or I lose my hair. And for me, it was worth it at that point to not wash my hair for a month. So I did not wash my hair for a month. I wore hats. It was disgusting and greasy, but I felt like every time I would wash my hair, I would lose just so much of it. And so
yeah. And if you're going to put that much effort into it, you might as well embrace it. Was there ever a time where you were just like, fuck it, I'm just going to shave it off?
Oh, totally. I had so many of those times where I'm like, I'm done. It's so thin. And Kenny was like, but we're already this deep. Like we're already in it. We're already so close. And I think that was the benefit of having him cold cap for me because he had also put in a lot of work, right? And so he helped talk me off that ledge, and he was the one telling me, well, don't wash it. If you're losing so much of it while you're washing it, just don't wash it for a month. And so I did.
Well, more power to you as a couple, because we do know that a lot of couples don't work that well together, that they're not good partners in that way, which sometimes leads to divorce and all of the things, right? I'm so happy that you and Kenny were able to get through that. And again, you look absolutely beautiful and glowing. And I'm very proud of you for that. I know that there are some side effects. Neuropathy, for example, is a major side effect. I had neuropathy. So with the Taxol, and I still have a little bit of neuropathy in my mouth. I don't know if you do.
Wow, in your mouth?
It's like on my it's on the roof of my mouth. But that's one of the major side effects. So talk to us about cryotherapy for your hands and feet, because I know you did that as well. What is cryotherapy?
So cryotherapy is cold therapy, right? And one thing that you talk a lot about that I think is so important, if you're listening to this, getting ready to go into chemo, just remember to be your own advocate. Advocate for yourself, do your research, talk to whoever you can who's been there, listen to podcasts, because you're not going to get presented with all evidence-based options. You won't. There's a standard of care that is going to be followed, but you have choices and you do have ways to mitigate side effects. So obviously cold capping is a way to keep your hair, but neuropathy, I think, happens to about 60% of people who undergo taxane chemotherapies or things like Taxol. And so there are ways to mitigate this side effect using cryotherapy. And actually, another thing I just want to mention that I wish I had known about is fasting. Fasting during chemo is now showing a lot of benefits, including making the chemo more effective. And so again, just do your research, look into your options going into it. Even though I know it's a super overwhelming, crazy time, you always have options and things you can do to make sure you come out the other side as healthy as possible.
I want to go back to that fasting thing because I've heard that too, and coffee enemas and things like that. Obviously, we're not doctors, so we can't say this works or whatever. But it is interesting because I have heard about fasting, and you might hear from other people, no, you need to make sure that you put that nutrition in your body and to get you through and stuff like that. So there's so many schools of thoughts on that. And so that's why I like how you said, listen to podcasts, listen to other people who have been through it, because there is that standard of care and they're not going to tell you certain things that you probably want to know. So advocating, doing your own research, don't necessarily go to Dr. Google. I would say 100% talk to other breast cancer survivors. I interviewed a gal on an earlier episode about plant-based eating. She was a breast cancer. She is a breast cancer survivor and she went plant-based, and she's been plant-based for the last 20 some years and swears by that. And I've actually gone plant-based for the most part, primarily. But yeah, so thanks for bringing that up as far as sometimes we need to ask other people.
Well, and I can give a little bit of background as to why I did bring that up. So we just recently met with, her name is Dr. Christy Funk. She's a kind of a celebrity surgeon in LA. And the reason we met with her was more regarding reconstruction. But something that she mentioned is that she puts all of her patients on a fasting protocol during chemo because she sees basically more efficacy out of the chemo. She uses the Prolon fasting kits.
Okay.
And so that's the reason that I mentioned that. And then I think there is some decent research behind it. But to your point, we all know what's right for us, right? And so we have to decide. Knowing all the options, I think, is always beneficial, but then you get to pick and choose what you want to do and what's right for you.
Right.
Yeah. So on that subject, going back to the neuropathy, I was again lucky enough to have a friend who had just gone through chemo and who is a PA and who had done a lot of research about neuropathy. And she told me, she's like, Amber, you have to ice your hands and your feet during Taxol. I see so many patients who don't have feeling in their fingers and their toes, and they never get it back. If you do one thing, like forget about the cold cap, but ice your hands and your feet. And at that point, we already had ordered the cold cap stuff. We knew we were going to have dry ice. And so we decided during the Taxol we bought just on Amazon, like the ice gloves and the ice socks. And we threw them in with the dry ice and the cold cap stuff. And we decided, okay, we're going to ice my hands and my feet. And that was the day I met you. Man, I mean, it was hard.
Yeah.
My fingers were numb and I could not keep them iced the whole time because I probably would have ended up with frostbite. But I do feel like that cold helped. What it's supposed to do is it's supposed to freeze the areas so that they constrict. So in your fingers and in your toes, they constrict. And so the chemo can't reach those areas in as strong of doses. I'm probably butchering this the way I'm describing it, but that was my very rudimentary understanding of how cryotherapy works. And it does the same thing on your head, which is why you don't end up losing your hair, is it freezes all the little capillaries. And so the chemo can't get to those spots in as strong.
I don't think you butchered it at all. I totally got that. Now, did it work for you? So
I did have a little bit of tingling post chemo and a little bit of pain, but it's gone completely. So I would say it did work for me. It worked for my friend who lives in Oregon who did it. She actually just brought a bucket of ice in and just put her hands and feet in the ice.
I feel like I'm picturing you because when I first met you, you had all the things, right? So I'm so glad that I was able to take your mind off of your fingers and your hair and bring them right to your breasts. So we could talk about breasts instead. What am I going to do for surgery?
Well, and like I said, the Red Devil infusion is just like 25 minutes. And so you do your pre-meds and your But I mean, I felt like during Red Devil, we were there for maybe an hour. And then that Taxol infusion, for me, it was 3 hours because I did the dose
Oh,
things.
wow.
And so, man, those were long, freezing infusions. And I definitely missed you the next time. I wished you were there so you could take my mind off of all of it.
And I would say, so I actually have been going to sit with my friend who has colorectal cancer now, for her chemo sessions every once in a while. I'm going actually to sit with her tomorrow. So I would say if you're ever sitting there and you want somebody to be there, reach out and ask them, hey, will you sit with me? Because it is helpful. It really is. And had you asked me to come and sit with you, I probably would have come. So just so you know. I don't know if I do the cold capping. You could teach me or whatever, because I guess I could help out with that sometimes. It's probably good to know. I actually, come to think of it, I do have a little bit of neuropathy in my fingertips, but what I will say is that I don't know whether it's arthritis or what, but I now have this weird arthritis, especially at nighttime. When anytime I wake up during the night or in the morning, I have to seriously squeeze my hands together to get them to move properly. It's really weird. And I don't know if that's from chemo or what, but I just really appreciate your bringing us into the world of cold capping and cryotherapy and how that worked for you. And again, I want to reiterate to you and my audience, everyone gets to do the journey the way they want to do the journey. It is so personal, and there should be, I understand the guilt because I felt certain things like, why am I feeling that way? But I understand the guilt, but I hope that you and anyone else who decides to go down whatever road they want to go down to not feel guilty. It's no one else's business.
Yes.
But yours. And so I'm just really actually glad that you did do it, because we get to share it now. We get to share it with our audience for other people who are considering doing it. We know that it's expensive. We know that it's a lot of work. We know that you have to have someone who is completely committed to it, but it works in a lot of different ways. And I just thank you for sharing that. You have some resources that you've shared that I'm going to put in the show notes. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So what I will say is if we can do it, anybody can do it. And there are resources that we didn't use that are available to people. So I know because it is funny, you talk about meeting people at chemo. I remember I was there with a cold cap and the nurse told me, hey, you need to go meet this girl. She's cold capping too. And she was almost exactly my age. She had the same kind of cold cap. And it worked amazingly for her. But she actually had Teresa at Penguin Cold Caps come out and do it for her first chemo infusion and teach her support person how to do it. So there are tons of resources. It is expensive, and I wanted to give people an idea of what it cost for us to rent. So I had 8 rounds of chemo 2 weeks apart. To rent the cold caps was $449 a month.
Okay.
And then the dry ice per infusion, we had to buy 60 pounds of dry ice. That was about $120 a chemo infusion. So in total, it cost us close to $3,000, probably about $2,700 to do the cold cap. That's a lot. It's a lot of money. What I didn't realize though, is that wigs are also a good quality wig is pretty expensive too.
Yes.
So something just to consider when you're trying to decide if it's right for you or not.
So I got a wig from, what's the place here? I can't remember what it's called now. But if you go to Moms on the Run, they will actually, if you get a voucher of some sort, if you're in the Reno area, and most areas probably have this, where if you get a voucher, they will pay for half of the wig.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
That's amazing.
And we are probably talking about my same girl, Michelle, is who was doing the cold capping when you were. Was her name Michelle?
No, the girl I met was named Megan.
Oh, another one. Wow. Yeah. She was doing it at the same time that you were doing it in the same infusion center. And I remember sitting across from her. And I looked over and I said, are you doing cold capping? And she said, yeah. And I said, oh my God, tell me more about it. And this was way was quite a while before I met you. And then she looked at me and she goes, "Are you Jamie Allen Vaughn?" I said, "Yes." And she told me her name and she goes, "I'm friends with so-and-so." And I said, "Oh my God, he told me that you were going through cancer and all this stuff." So I thought maybe you may have met her, but okay, another gal who did cold capping.
I think it's a really common thing. And I think a lot of people want to try to keep their hair for so many reasons. But yeah, it's funny. It's funny how you find the other cold cappers because you're a whole situation going into every chemo infusion. We were a whole situation. We'd have our huge ice chest. I would come in with the cold cap's heavy, like this huge ice cap on your head, and your head goes numb almost right away. There's a little bit of pain and tingling to start during the first couple of cold caps, but then your head just basically goes numb. But yeah, I remember walking into every infusion just feeling like an absolute ass. And my good friend told me, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss, but she told me when you're diagnosed, like you just give zero fucks, right? You do what you need to do. You do what you decide to do because it is your journey. And that's what we did. But then another couple of tips or resources that I do want to point out before we go is, and I already mentioned this, but I think it's really helpful to know where to buy dry ice and also to consider that shortages can happen because that was something we ran into. We were about halfway through our cold capping and there was a dry ice shortage in Reno and we couldn't find it. Yeah, we couldn't find it anywhere. We called around and in my mind, I was thinking like, gosh, all right, well, this is it. Like we fought the good fight, but here we go. Like my hair's falling out. We don't have any choice. We can't get dry ice. And luckily we found it at Winco, was another place here in Reno that had it. But I remember just the relief that like, oh my God, okay, we found a place that has it. So like I mentioned, there are lots of places to get it here in Reno, but really the Crystal Ice distributor on 4th Street is by far the cheapest.
So do your research on that. Yeah. Also, look on YouTube. You're going to provide some YouTube links that were very helpful. YouTube is amazing. If you want to fix a toilet, watch YouTube. If you want to fix your carburetor, whatever, just YouTube it. Yeah. If you want to put together a Traeger or a patio swing, YouTube it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And same
Good
with
advice.
Cold capping. I mean, we have so much gratitude for this person who did this tutorial because he just made it so easy for us to do. And I provided that link. So yeah. And then the last thing I would say is if anybody wants to try it and they have any questions or they want somebody to show them in person, like I am happy to be a resource. We will gladly, please reach out to me. I would love to help. If that's something you decide you want to do, I would love to help show you how to put it on, how we did it. Any way I can help support you. If you're interested in cold capping, I would love to be a resource. So.
Well, thank you for doing that. That just shows me and tells me and my audience just what a wonderful human being you are and your husband. And I have your Instagram on the show notes, your email address, and a few other resources. So thank you for just your time, just being such a wonderful person. And do you have anything else to say before we wrap up?
No, just thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for doing this podcast. I think, again, I wish I would have known about a podcast like this going into cancer treatment. I think it would have changed a lot of things for me.
Me too. That's why I did it. And that's why I have people like you on. So thanks. And I just want to let my audience know, thank you for joining us on this episode. It means so much to me when you tune in. And Amber, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And we will see you all next time on the next episode of Test Those Breasts.
Thanks, Jamie.
Friends, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I hope you got some great, much needed information that will help you with your journey. As always, I am open for guests to add value to my show, and I'm also open to being a guest on other podcasts where I can add value. So please reach out if you'd like to collaborate. My contact information is in the show notes. I rely on people like you to listen, rate, review, and share this podcast with your loved ones. So please enjoy my trailer and any other episodes. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm on Apple, Spotify, and other platforms. I look forward to sharing my next episode of Test Those Breasts.